You look like you've been out here all day." That was the first thing he said. No pickup line, no awkward joke. Just honest to simple, and plain like the dusty road beneath his boots. He looked no older than 19. Tall, lean, dark curls clinging to his temple from sweat. His work boots were scuffed. The laces dragged through gravel like they'd seen too many summers, and not enough rest. Sienna Carrington Taylor narrowed her eyes behind a pair of gold-rimmed sunglasses. Her Porsche sat helpless with a shredded rear tire, 30 miles outside of Grand Junction, Colorado, in a place where even the cacti looked like they didn't want to be bothered. The sun was unforgiving, the air still and dry, and her phone worth over a grand had no signal. Typical. "I've been here long enough to hate every cactus in a 5-mile radius," she replied, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her flushed cheek. The boy chuckled, gentle, genuine. It disarmed her more than she cared to admit. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. She hesitated. She was a woman alone on a deserted road, wearing leather flats that were no match for the desert terrain. But something about his eyes, calm, steady, uninterested in the logo on her car or the brand of her sunglasses, put her at ease. He looked at her like she wasn't a headline or a bank account. Just stuck. "Sure," she said. He dropped his worn backpack and pulled out a small toolkit and gloves that looked older than him. His movements were practiced, smooth, no wasted effort. Within minutes, he had the trunk open and the spare tire out, already on one knee beside the car like it was second nature. "You do this often?" she asked, arms folded. "Sometimes. My uncle ran a shop in town, taught me everything before he passed." That silenced her, not out of pity but out of understanding, loss, legacy. She leaned back against the car, watching him work. There was something almost rhythmic about the way he tightened bolts, the way the sun gleamed off the lines of his face, young but already weathered. In 10 minutes, it was done. "You're all set," he said, standing and wiping his hands on his jeans. She reached into her designer clutch. "Let me pay you." He stepped back, holding up a hand. "No need, ma'am. I'm just glad I came down this road today." Her fingers froze halfway to her wallet. He didn't want anything? "I've got what I need," he said, slinging the pack over his shoulder. Something about the way he said it stayed with her. "What's your name?" "Jalen Brooks," he said. She blinked, almost didn't want to say her own. "Sienna. Taylor." He gave her a soft nod, smiled once, and walked up the hill, the late afternoon sun stretching his shadow across the asphalt like a quiet signature. That night, Sienna sat on the balcony of her family's second homier sleek ranch, perched above the Colorado River. Her wine had gone warm in her hand. Her phone buzzed with texts she didn't want to read from her publicist, her ex, her former board members. They all had something to say now. 3 weeks ago, none of them had looked her in the eye as they voted her out of her own company. They'd called it a graceful transition. She called it betrayal. They didn't know what grace really looked like. But that boy, Jalen, he'd shown her. In silence, in sweat, in the way he walked away when there was nothing in it for him. 2 days later, she found herself driving the same road again. Slowing near every shoulder, peering past every mailbox. Ridiculous, she thought. But still, she kept looking. And then there he was, up on a ladder, hammering nails into the frame of an old porch for a woman who looked like she could have been anyone's grandmother. Jalen didn't notice her car until the woman called up. "You got company, hun?" He turned, blinked, then smiled, cautious but curious. "Miss Taylor." "I was, in the neighborhood." She lied, terribly. He climbed down, wiping his hands. "Everything okay with the tire?" "Perfect," she said. "But I never got to say thank you properly." "You already did." She looked at the porch, the tools, the way he moved like he belonged to this world of crooked fences and chipped paint. "You do this a lot?" "Sometimes," he said. "People need help, and I like using my hands." They stood there for a moment, just breathing in the scent of cedar and dust. She reached into her car and handed him a bottle of cold water. Their fingers brushed. She didn't look away. "Thanks," he said, unscrewing the cap. She hesitated. Then, "I don't suppose you like coffee?" He smiled his first real smile. "Depends who's asking." She smiled back. "Someone who's not done driving this road yet." The coffee shop sat quietly at the edge of town, nestled between a shuttered video rental store and a pawn shop with a neon sign that hadn't worked right in years. The walls inside were sun-bleached, and the air smelled like old bacon grease and burnt coffee. No one in there wore a suit. No one expected Sienna Taylor to walk through the door. But she did. Her linen blouse was crisp, her jeans were designer, and her shoes, well, even she had to admit they were impractical for this place. The regulars turned to glance, just briefly, before going back to their chipped mugs and slow conversations. Only the waitress raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Sienna found a booth by the window and sat down, ordering black coffee with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She waited, fingers tracing the cracked red leather of the seat, eyes drifting to the street outside where she had first seen Jalen 2 days ago, balanced on a ladder, hammering in the hot sun. She didn't know why she was here again. Not really. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something else. Something harder to admit. The bell over the door rang. She looked up. There he was, dust on his sleeves, hands darkened from work, posture relaxed but alert. Jalen stepped in and gave a nod to someone behind the counter. Then his eyes found hers, and his step slowed just a bit. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said, voice easy. She gestured to the booth across from her. "Join me?" He paused, then slid in across from her, still wearing the same cautious half-smile. "I don't usually do coffee breaks with millionaires. And I don't usually chase down mechanics," she said with a smirk. He chuckled. "I'm not really a mechanic. Number. You fix things," she said simply. "You fixed me." That gave him pause. His expression shifted, softened, maybe. But he didn't say anything right away. Their coffees arrived, and for a while, they stirred and sipped in silence. Then he asked, "So, why are you really here?" Sienna looked out the window. "Honestly, I don't know. I was driving, and I ended up here again." "You're not used to being curious without a reason, are you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm not used to people walking away from me." He looked down at his cup. "People like me don't usually get asked to stay." It wasn't bitter, what he said. It was just true. "I grew up in a house where nothing stayed fixed," he added after a beat. "Mom left, Dad drank. My aunt held things together with duct tape and faith. So I learned early, if something breaks, and you can't replace it, you learn to fix it. You survive." "Do you ever ask for help?" she asked quietly. He smiled. "I ask this guy down at the hardware store sometimes. It's cheaper." She laughed, and this time, it wasn't forced. He liked that, the sound of her laughter, like maybe she hadn't heard it in a while. "What about you?" he asked. "What brings a woman like you to a place like this?" Sienna looked away for a moment, gathering words she hadn't dared say aloud. "I lost something," she said finally. "Maybe I never really had it." He waited. "I walked out of that boardroom 3 weeks ago, after they voted me out, and no one looked me in the eye. They just handed me a check and said, 'Thank you for your service.' Like I'd been discharged." Jalen tapped his fingers once on the table. "Sometimes the exit is the best part of the building." She looked up, surprised by that. "You're good with words," she said. "I build fences for a living," he replied. "Gives you time to think." Silence settled between them again, this time softer, more familiar. Then, as if pulled by something beyond her control, Sienna reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. She slid it across the table. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "An idea," she said. "A place, a community shop, for people like you who fix things, who never get asked to stay, training programs, mentorship, a place with dignity. But it needs someone who actually knows how to build things." He didn't touch the notebook right away. "You barely know me," he said. "I know what you did when no one was watching," she replied. "That's more than I can say for most of the people in my world." He opened it slowly. The pages were filled with blue ink sketches, rough diagrams, handwritten notes in slanted cursive. They weren't perfect, but the intention behind them was clear. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this," he said finally. "I'm not sure I am either," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. The next afternoon, the sun was already beating down on the gravel lot behind Thompson Hardware. Jalen stood in the shade of a half-finished shed, sorting bolts into an old coffee tin, pretending he hadn't heard the smooth engine of the car that rolled up behind him. But he knew. He always knew the sound of things that didn't belong here. She stepped out, low boots instead of heels, her hair tied back, face flushed not from the sun, but from something heavier. "You lost again?" he said dryly, still not looking up. "I was in the area," she replied. He gave a quiet chuckle, no heat in it. "You rich folks are always in the area when you want something." She walked closer, careful not to step on the tools scattered on the workbench. "I'm not here for a fight." Good, he muttered. I'm tired of those. I wanted to say I'm sorry. That made him pause. For what? For making you feel like you were a curiosity in my world. For dragging you into that room without asking how you'd feel. For not stopping when you clearly wanted to leave. He sighed, finally wiping his hands and setting the tin down. It wasn't about leaving. It was about being seen the wrong way. She looked around the wood, the dust, the open sky. A world far from Carrington estates and curated guest lists. I brought you into my space, she said, but I never gave you room to breathe. He finally looked at her. Why do you care so much? He asked. Her voice cracked just slightly. Because you're the first person in years who looked at me without expectation, without judgment. You just saw me. That silenced him. And when I lost everything that made people return my calls when I couldn't walk into my own boardroom without whispers, you reminded me I still had worth. He folded his arms, guarded, still unsure. So now I'm your emotional crutch. She shook her head. Number. You're my mirror. The one thing in my life that's been honest. She reached into her bag again, pulled out the notebook. It was worn now, creased corners, filled with new pages. I kept working on it, she said. The workshop, the training center. It's not a pitch, it's real. He took it, flipped through the pages slowly. You could see the hours in it, the care. You don't have to say yes, she added, eyes searching his. I just want you to know. I meant every word. He closed the notebook gently, like it was something fragile. Why me? She smiled, wet-eyed but steady. Because you don't need to be rich to be extraordinary. He stared at her, and for the first time since the night on the terrace, he let himself really see her. Beyond the money, beyond the broken pieces. Just her. He nodded once. All right. I'll help you build it. She blinked. Really? But on one condition. What? You stop apologizing for loving something real. She laughed. Soft, grateful. Deal. Do. Later that week, they sat on the tailgate of a beat-up pickup at the edge of a wide, empty lot. Blueprints spread between them. Coffee in hand. Dusk, creeping into the mountains like a slow song. You drew this electrical setup backwards, Jalen said, pointing. No, I didn't, she said, squinting. He raised an eyebrow. She sighed. Fine. Maybe I did. He smirked. You're lucky I'm patient. I'm lucky for a lot of things lately. She looked out at the land, saw more than dirt. She saw hope. They're going to come after me again, you know, she said. The board, the press, they think this is a vanity project, that I'm throwing money at a boy I barely know. Jalen shrugged. Then let them say it. You're not afraid? I've been underestimated my whole life. It doesn't scare me anymore, but it does fuel me. Silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy, it was solid, like something that could carry weight. He added, almost casually, You're not the only one who lost something. She turned to him. What did you lose? I lost faith, in people, in fairness, in second chances. She didn't say anything. But you, showing up every time. He trailed off, then looked at her. That started something. Her voice was soft. What did it start? He smiled. Hope. The Denver Civic Convention Center shimmered like glass armor under the spring sun. Inside, 1,000 industry titans, media voices, and eager-eyed entrepreneurs buzzed in anticipation. Massive sponsor logos pulsed on LED screens, while assistants scurried backstage, checking microphones and adjusting agendas. Sienna stood behind the curtain, her palms slightly damp, the mic clipped neatly to her blazer. You don't have to do this, her assistant whispered. Yes, I do, she said calmly. They need to see it, all of it. Her name echoed across the loudspeakers. Please welcome Sienna Taylor, founder of Elevate Tech and former CEO of Carrington Green. She stepped into the light. The applause was polite, distant. Jalen watched from the very back row, surrounded by suits, his shoulders squared in a borrowed blazer. His boots didn't match the rest of the room, but he didn't care. He was there because she'd asked. Because he wanted to be. Sienna reached the podium and paused. The lights were harsh, the silence expectant. She looked out across the faces of people who once dismissed her, doubted her, replaced her. She didn't read from her notes. I'm not here to talk about projections, she began, or IPOs, or market share. A murmur of confusion rippled. I'm here to talk about what happens when we lose sight of people, in pursuit of profit. The room stilled. When we trade integrity for influence. when we stop listening to voices that don't wear suits. Behind her, the screen flickered not to graphs or charts, but to an image of a dusty workbench. Tools scattered, hands calloused. Children learning from a man with a pencil behind his ear and wisdom in his eyes. "I left Carrington Green," she continued, voice unwavering. "What you don't know is why." Another image, a class in session. Kids building, laughing, learning. Jalen, centered, unaware he's being watched. "I brought someone to an industry event last month. Some of you were there. Some of you whispered, assumed, laughed." She took a breath. "What none of you saw was what I saw. A builder, a teacher, a man with more wisdom than most of the executives I sat beside for 10 years. She scanned the room until her eyes found his, even if just in spirit. "I love him." The room went still. Not gasping, not scandalized, stunned. "And if that cost me your funding, your respect, your seat at next year's keynote, so be it." Gasps, phones raised, journalists tapped furiously. She smiled, just barely. "Because I'd rather build something honest with him than pretend with any of you." And with that, she walked off stage. Backstage, her assistant looked pale. "Sienna, the press." "Let them write," she said, unclipping the mic. "I gave them something worth writing." Just down the corridor, Jalen stood frozen in the hallway. He'd made his way there the moment her speech ended. Now, he stared at her. Eyes unreadable, full of something old and new. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know. You could lose everything." She stepped toward him. "Then let me lose it, with intention." He swallowed. "You meant it? All of it? Every word?" They stood in the hallway, two people in the storm, anchored by something stronger than fear. "Then I'm staying," he said. A beat passed. She nodded, eyes wet. "Good. UA." That night, the internet burned. CEO declares love for unknown builder at Tech Summit. Carrington heiress chooses community over fortune. She gave up everything for a man with dirt under his nails. Investors pulled out. Former colleagues released statements. Board members distanced themselves. But something else happened too. Letters began pouring in from veterans, teachers, welders, students, grandmothers, people who said they had finally been seen. One message stood out. "My brother says I can't build things because I'm a girl, but you showed them. You built something brave." Sienna read the note aloud to Jalen one night under the stars. They sat on the porch of the partially built workshop, backs pressed to the rough wood, legs dangling into the dirt. "She gets it," he said, arms folded behind his head. "Yeah," Sienna whispered. "She does." Then he turned to her. "You didn't just break their silence, you know." She looked over. "What do you mean?" "You broke mine." UA. 1 year later. The morning sun stretched wide across a lot just outside Grand Junction, where once stood an abandoned warehouse. Now stood a clean-lined building clad in pinewood and corrugated steel, the Brooks and Taylor Institute. Below its name, etched in metal, 3 words: skills, dignity, future. Inside, sawdust mixed with the smell of brewed coffee and cinnamon rolls donated by a local bakery. Rows of benches lined the main hall, filled with students of every shade: black, white, Navajo, Latino, laughing, measuring, building. At the front of the class, Jalen stood in jeans and a worn blue work shirt, apron dusted with chalk. He guided a teenager through a dovetail joint with the same patience he once gave a tire on the side of the road. He didn't feel like an outsider anymore. He felt home. By the door, Sienna greeted donors and local officials, her presence calm and unshaken. She still wore tailored jackets, but her eyes told a different story, now grounded, full of purpose. Her phone buzzed in her purse. Dozens of missed calls, offers, press. She didn't answer a single one. Outside, a podium had been set up. Rows of folding chairs filled with guests, some local, some from far away. 2 American flags flanked the stage. Young trees danced in the breeze behind them, planted the spring before. Jalen stepped to the mic. He adjusted it quietly, looked out across the crowd, exhaled. "I used to believe some people were just born to stay small," he began. "That no matter how hard you worked, there were rooms you'd never be invited into." He paused, let the truth breathe. "And then, I met someone who didn't just invite me in. She stepped outside the door, sat next to me, and listened." Sienna's eyes glistened. "She didn't hand me a ladder. She handed me tools, and together, we built something bigger than either of us. He gestured to the building behind him. This place isn't just for kids who want to learn how to build a table. It's for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong. For the quiet ones. The ones who fix without being seen. He smiled. It's for people like me. Applause erupted, but he didn't move. He let it live. Then added, we named it Brooks and Taylor. But the truth is, this place doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the future. Offered. That evening, they sat on the back steps, watching a few kids chase each other across the field. The workshop behind them glowed with soft light and laughter. Sienna leaned her head on Jalen's shoulder. You nailed it. I didn't stutter. Nope, you just turned every grown man in that crowd into a puddle. He laughed, but this time, the sound came from somewhere healed. You ever miss it? He asked. The old world? She shook her head. Not for a second. I didn't lose power. I just found a better way to use it. He nodded. You remember what you told me, after that first conference? Which part? That loving something real was worth losing everything else. She smiled. Yeah. He held her hand, kissed her knuckles. You were right. Just then, she pulled something from her bag, a small framed photo. She handed it to him. It was a picture of Jalen, from behind, teaching a class. On the frame, in clean script. Love builds. He looked at her. Where do we hang it? She smiled. At the heart.